purpose of affordable housing is relatively simple: to provide adequate shelter for people at a range of incomes who cannot afford to pay the market rate. Welcome back. In our previous session, we talked about the current housing crisis and the complex economics of how we arrived to be in this state. We talked about the requirement for diverse types of affordable housing to meet the needs of different household income levels. Increasing the supply of affordable housing requires innovative and disruptive thinking, and true affordable housing requires collaboration between all levels of government, public sector, and private sector developers. Collaborative housing development planning between all of these stakeholders groups is not an easy task, but it is essential if, for example, we want to target rental housing and affordable rental housing. So let's start there. Affordable rental housing is one of the housing types that we talked about that are in very short supply and in very high demand. Although there is the market rental housing provided by private sector landlords, it can be precarious or at a highly competitive rate. And true affordable housing or market rental units are, for the most part, provided through community housing, local government housing, cooperative housing, or nonprofit housing, organizations like Bethlehem. But typically, we take the profitability out of the equation, or at least we reduce it. Recently, you may have heard the term the financialization of housing. This phenomenon occurs when housing is treated as a commodity, a vehicle for wealth and investment, rather than a social good. And there's currently indication that this is what's happening in our housing market. Rental development is riskier and more costly. Condos are less risky and more profitable. But given that housing development involves private sector developers, we cannot deny their aim to make a profit. The key is to find or motivate developers who are willing to make investments with adequate or lower returns. These can be found through incentives that lower risk, and they are typically through municipal government planning policy. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the development of a truly affordable rental housing project is more likely to be achieved through a collaboration of sector partners that include government, private sector, public or nonprofit partners. These are sometimes identified as a P3 partnership model. With this model, each partner has a specific and important role and responsibility to the project. Many feel the responsibility solely rests on the government. So let's first address the role of government. And although it can be confusing, in Canada we have 3 levels of government, and therefore, when it comes to housing, we have an intergovernmental role, meaning each level of government plays a specific role and has their own jurisdictional mandate for supporting housing, homelessness services, housing programs, and affordable housing development. In Niagara, we have an additional layer with a regional government. This means that we have 2 tiers of involvement with municipal level processes and approvals. The federal government is more involved at the capital or investment level. They determine tax expenditures related to home ownership and overall housing policy. And it does this in part through the Crown Corporation called Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, or CMHC. The federal government developed and introduced a national housing strategy with investment programs for housing development. Provinces and municipalities work together through the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing to implement policy through legislation, housing programs, land use planning, building codes, rental housing and tenant protection, social housing, and homelessness services. Municipalities have become more keenly aware of housing needs because it is playing out in their communities. Politicians and staff of the Niagara region and our municipalities have almost daily contact with people facing housing difficulties. And over the past couple of years, they have come to better understand their role and have worked to create and implement a variety of new policy tools and resources to support local affordable housing development. However, municipalities can't be expected to fulfill all the roles and responsibilities required to respond to the housing need. But when a community's needs are not met, the pressure is placed on our local government officials to respond. So municipalities do work at tackling housing problems, though often with inappropriate tools and resources. So they need to develop them, and this takes time. Their most important role has become one of creating conditions for greater participation in affordable housing development, such as facilitating collaboration and partnerships with other levels of government, and to motivate through incentives and support housing developers, both in the private sector and nonprofit housing sector, that can mobilize private capital investments. Incentive examples include investing in social housing, improved housing dispute processes, addressing NIMBYism, leveraging surplus lands, incentives through planning and development policies such as development charges and building fees, property tax reductions, or exemptions for inclusionary housing models. Even with these types of tools and resources, there's still no easy answers or easy solutions. But what is clear is that as a community of interested stakeholders, we want to continue to discuss opportunities and find new ways to reduce risks and create more ideal conditions to mobilize private investment in affordable rental housing development. At Bethlehem Housing and Support Services, we believe that everyone in Niagara deserves a safe and affordable place to call home. Everyone deserves a home that meets their needs and that they can afford. We hope you will continue to engage with us and your community to learn about housing in Niagara. Please join us next time, where we will share some successful partnership models and innovative affordable housing development solutions. Keep tuning in for future sessions. Topics will include the Niagara region's housing and homelessness strategies, misconceptions and myths about homelessness, and we will share the journeys of those with lived experience. Thank you for listening.